You would think that if God was going to answer anyone's prayer, surely he's going to answer the prayer of Zacharias and Elizabeth, and matter of fact, he answer it in a quick or instant manner. But in this, we see that they were righteous before God. They were doing everything they know how to do. And perhaps you that are listening, you're feeling the same way as Zacharias. We are doing everything we know how to do. We're keeping the commandments of God. We're walking in his ordinance. In verse number 7, the Bible says, but they had no children. They had no children. Not that they haven't been praying for children, but they had been praying and they had been in the temple for many years, because that was the ministry that they had, or Zacharias had. And after going in and praying and praying and praying, yet the very thing that was really in their spirit and what they really wanted to produce was not coming forth. Well, how can you say that? If you know the history of the Israel people and the Jewish people, children were their life. Children were everything. Matter of fact, they lived in order to be able to produce children so that they will have a legacy of and a heritage in their lineage. And so children was everything, and to be able to have a child and to be able to pass on the family traditions and the family values was everything to them. And so to not be able to have children was considered a curse, and not only was it considered a curse or a reproach, it was shameful not to be able to produce children. Now let me go back to my previous statement. You would have thought that just because they were walking upright before God, that they would be able to produce this child. But history tells us that after many days of prayer and many times of going into the temple and praying and offering up incense and doing ministry in the church, they had no children. They were praying, but it was not productive, or seems like it was not productive in the eyes of Zacharias and Elizabeth. So first of all, what do I do when my prayer doesn't seem to be productive? The first thing you must do, you must deal with the disappointment. After praying and expecting God and having faith in God, and yet you see nothing happening, you must deal with the disappointment. You say, deal with the disappointment. Well, how do you deal with the disappointment? Verse number 8 tells us how Zacharias dealt with disappointment. And it reads, so it was that while he was serving as priest before God, and it was his time to burn the incense, that was his ministry of the priesthood, and while the whole multitude of the people were praying, an angel of the Lord appeared to him and told him he was going to have a child, or his wife was going to have a child. Notice how Zechariah dealt with his disappointment. Zechariah went and kept serving. I want you to think about that. Because sometimes when dealing with disappointment, everything within us tells us to give up. Stop working for God. God ain't heard your prayer, so why continue in ministry? God has not heard your prayer, so why keep praying? Why keep doing what you do? Because it's not working. And perhaps there's someone out there under the sound of my voice that is hearing this word, and the enemy is fighting your mind and saying, what you're doing is not working. Because if God really was God, or if God really wanted you to have it, you would have produced it by now. So Zechariah deals with his disappointment by serving. By serving. Let me just tell you this. Serving is the way to get your breakthrough. Let me say it again. Serving is the way to get your breakthrough. Let me say it again. Serving is a way to get your breakthrough. Now, this principle must be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. So let's look at the 2 or 3 witnesses that we have that shows us that serving is the way to get a breakthrough. First of all, let's look at Joseph. You know Joseph. Joseph was the one that received this great prophecy that his brothers and his family would bow down to him and that he would be exalted. But as soon as he received this word of prophecy and received this word that he would be exalted, his life went into a downward spiral. His brothers sold him into slavery. Tried to kill him, then sold him into slavery. And then while he's in Egypt, he's in the Potiphar's house, and then Potiphar's wife lies on him and gets him thrown in prison. Can you imagine Joseph's disappointment? Can you imagine how he felt after receiving a prophecy that good times were ahead? After receiving a prophecy that he's going to be exalted, and immediately after that, his life goes into a downward spiral, and now he is in a prison. He's in a prison, isolated from family, friends. He's in a prison. Somebody right now, on the sound of my voice, may be in not a physical or state prison, but somebody may be in an emotional prison. Maybe in a spiritual prison where you feel isolated, where you feel like, oh, if I could just get out of this situation. Here, Joseph, the Bible says that while he's in prison, a butler and a baker comes to him. And they have dreams. And they begin to tell Joseph their dream. And Joseph interprets their dream. Now listen. Here is a person that was prophesied, had these dreams, knew what his dreams were, gets thrown into prison, and while he's in prison, he helped somebody else discover what their dreams meant. What was he doing? He was serving. Joseph had, according to our thinking, had every right to say, I'm not going to interpret nobody else's dream until my dream comes true. He could have said, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going, nope, you have to figure it out. I'm having to figure out my life, so you're going to have to figure out your life. But Joseph, like Zechariah, kept serving. He kept doing what he knew to do in spite of his disappointments. He served. And he tells them, he tells the butler, he says, listen, when you get back to back to Pharaoh's house, tell Pharaoh that I'm here. Let him know that I've been here, and I've been here for quite some time. But the butler forgets. He forgets. Have you ever felt in a situation that you have just been forgotten about? I've been forgotten about. What a lonely feeling. But because Joseph served, let me get to the heart of the story. Because Joseph served, there was a dream that Pharaoh had that he couldn't understand, and neither could his soothsayers and magicians. They could not solve the dream or interpret the dream. And then the butler comes and says, there's a man down in prison that when I was down there, he interpreted my dream. And so immediately Pharaoh says, go get that man. And when he brings him up, when he brings Joseph up, Joseph interprets the dream. And Pharaoh is so impressed that he exalts him to second in command. Let me just share this with you. Let me share this. Because had Joseph said, I'm not going to serve, if Joseph would have said, I quit, I gave up, I'm not going to serve this, and I'm not going to serve and interpret your dream, guess what would have happened? He would have never been discovered in that prison. How did he get his breakthrough? He got his breakthrough through serving. Another person was Hannah. Hannah had the same problem. She was barren, and she was being tormented by her adversary. Hannah was being tormented by her adversary. And so Hannah prays to God and says, give me a son, God. Would you please just give me a son? And she prays, and she prays so fervently that Eli, the priest, thought she was crazy, thought she was mad, out of her mind. But the interesting thing is, when you look at Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter number 1, and verse 19, it reads like this. And they rose up in the morning early and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house at Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Verse 20 said, wherefore it came to pass that when the time was come about Hannah had conceived and bare the son, and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of the Lord. Listen, what did Hannah do to get her breakthrough? She served. How did she serve? By worshiping. Hannah could have said, "Listen, I'm not going to worship God. I'm until I